Have you ever tried to do the impossible? I bet you have. If you're in this room, you're probably in the midst of doing something impossible. That hill you're about to climb, full of challenges, full of the unexpected. What gets me through the day is knowing that I can overcome anything. I will adapt. I will overcome. That's my mantra. Now, my mom loves to tell this story. She's right here in the middle of when I was 11 years old. Yeah, there you go, Mom. You can put your hand up. When I was 11 years old, we went on a family summer vacation. I was excited. We were headed to Jamaica. Now, I wasn't excited to see the beautiful ocean or the beaches. I was excited for a different reason. I was going to get to try real coconut water. We don't exactly get real coconut water right off the tree or from the fruit here in Marin or in Sonoma. So when I got there, I made it a mission. I had to find a coconut. And I found one. Victory. I took that coconut and I presented it to my parents with pride, and I asked them to open it for me. They wouldn't open it for me. They wouldn't even give me a knife either. I guess the idea of a hard coconut, a sharp knife, and an 11-year-old, maybe not the best combination. But that's how my folks are. They won't stop me from doing certain things, but they won't do everything for me either. It became a mission. I had to open that coconut. So I carried that coconut with me for 3 days, slamming it on the ground, stomping on it. Finally, on the third day, I looked down and I smiled because I saw a brick and I knew I had a chance. So I picked up that brick, and with the force of Thor, crack, I got that coconut wide open. I could now enjoy the delicious, warm coconut water. But you know what? Coconut water never tasted so good. This one I did the easy way, as you can see. But this story, it's not about coconut water, right? It's about being faced with an impossible task and then figuring out how to get it done. My general attitude is, go on, tell me I can't do something. Go on, tell me. Anyone else here relate to that as an entrepreneur? You have to, because you have to be determined. When you get knocked down, you get up again, and again, and again. They're never gonna hold you down. Now, fast forward to me selling my company. My company was basically Zillow of Brazil. So, here I was in this process of selling this business, something that I'd really put my blood, sweat, and tears into. It was kind of a very reflective time. I was really introspective about the whole journey and all the challenges that I faced and all the things I had to overcome. And I remember coming across this concept called Ikigai, if you've ever heard of it. Ikigai is a Japanese concept, and it basically means kind of reason for being. It's, the meaning behind what you do. And, at that time, I did have meaning going back to being a kid. I'm going to switch it back for a second. I'm going to go back to when I was a kid. I did have meaning. I will crack open that coconut. I will make money so that I can do the things that I want to do. And that's exactly what I did. So I mentioned I grew up in Sebastopol. So this is me in the summer teaching swim lessons. This was my first business that I started. And, I had a lot of neighborhood kids that would come in, and hey, business was pretty good actually. I ended up over one summer, I think at the peak, I think I had 60 students, and I remember my best revenue week was $1,500 in 1 week. Not bad for a high school student. Now, when I say revenue, it wasn't profit, because my parents right over here, they took 15% right off the top to heat the pool. Who would have thought that my first lesson in operating expenses would come from these hippies that got married in Armstrong Woods here, not too far. But all jokes aside, I learned a lot about business, from, both my parents, a lot about how to treat people. And, I loved the process. I loved to teach. But more than teaching, what I really loved was the freedom that I got, right? I had the money to be able to do the things that I wanted to do at that age. And I think, I'm not unique in that way. I think that we pursue our passion for our purpose. It's our why. And so, as I, think about this journey, I ended up, if I think of as an entrepreneur, everyone has passion and purpose. You have to have it. You may not know you have it, but you definitely have it. And, purpose doesn't have to be something that defines you completely. It doesn't have to be something eternal. It can be temporary, but the key thing is you have to have it. It can be something as simple as building something that someone wants. It could be something more transformative, but the key thing is you have to have it. Now, funny enough, this purpose that would send me down this path of being an entrepreneur was for a rather predictable reason. And it was to be closer to a girl. My wife's over here. Hi, Andrea. It was to be closer to a girl. That's not the entire story, but I'll get there. So when I graduated college, this is me working with my dad on his crew. He had a local business in Santa Rosa. It was called Stripe and Seal and Aaron Paving. And, I got to do some hard labor after college, save a little bit of money. I think I wrecked a truck. Sorry about that, Dad. But I was able to save a little bit of money to pursue the two things that I knew that I wanted to do. I knew that, I wanted to be an entrepreneur someday, but I wasn't quite ready for it. And so at that time, I knew that I wanted to travel a lot, and I wanted to be closer to my then college girlfriend, Andrea, who had gone back to Bogota, Colombia, after her study abroad. And so I got in my car on an epic journey, and I drove south. This is the Burro Blanco you can see, that was the name of our car, with a buddy from Santa Rosa, and we headed south and we crisscrossed Mexico. I had that purpose of traveling a little bit, purpose of seeing Andrea, and when I got to Costa Rica, things kind of changed a little bit. It wasn't to travel anymore, it was to be closer to Andrea. And so when I got to Colombia, when I got to Bogota, my pockets were pretty empty. I landed and I obviously needed a place to stay. So as a gringo, you kind of think about it, put yourself in my shoes. Maybe you'll look for something like cheap short-term housing, like a Motel 6 or something, right? And so I ended up arriving, dropping my bags off fairly quickly to this, this place, this motel, and we went out on a night on the town. Her family took me out to a nice dinner, went to the theater. Now, when we came back, they asked me if I wanted a ride. No Uber, obviously, then. And so I gladly accepted the invitation to get a ride. And as we're pulling up to this place, there was some kind of strange tension in the car. I could just feel it. And this is one of my first lessons in language and culture. I don't know if you know what a motel is in Colombia, but it's a place that you rent by the hour. So that was interesting, but it definitely was a motivator to go out and find a place to stay, right? An apartment. And so, my purpose was starting to change a little bit. I needed to find a place to stay, and I remember picking up the classifieds. This is 2005. That's how you could search for properties at this time. There's a word that I really like before I talk about this next part of my journey, and the word is serendipity. I'm sure everyone knows, and for some reason, as a kid, I always really liked this word. And serendipity, we know it's kind of this chance encounter, right? It's this chance encounter with something. But what makes serendipity different than luck is you have to choose something. You have to choose. You adapt in some way. You change. You adapt. And that's, in order for serendipity to really matter. And so here I was looking for this, this property, and I ended up meeting with an agent. I found an ad in the newspaper, and I met with this agent, and they assured me, we met at a cafe, and they assured me they had the perfect property that I was looking for. And I was excited. Okay, let's go check them out. And reached into their briefcase and pulled out this list of 15 properties and said, the place you're looking for is on this list. I'm like, great, let's go see. And he kind of wagged his finger at me. He's like, no. That's going to be 20,000 pesos. Sounds like a lot of money. It was a lot of money for me at the time. But I thought, why is this person charging me to see information? That feels really unfair. But then I thought, back where I'm staying, okay, I reluctantly handed the money over, and I proceeded to visit these properties. Now, the first property, already rented. Second property, too big. Third property, too expensive. So I came away empty-handed, and it was, a complete waste of an entire day. Another moment of serendipity, perhaps. Another moment, another chance encounter with a problem. I remember visualizing the idea of a central repository where I could see all of the inventory in the market. And that seed was planted in my head. But before that, I needed money to continue this journey and to continue to stay in Colombia. And so I did the only thing that I could do at the time, which was I spoke English. I knew people wanted to learn English. And so I bought a business book. It was a book to, teach executives business English. And I proceeded to walk the streets of Bogota, Colombia, pitching my classes to companies. And I recall really clearly this building on the main avenue in the financial district. And I kind of looked up and I was like, I'm going to get in this building somehow. And, it's a little security in these big cities. And I remember everyone's kind of formally dressed in Bogota. Everyone has kind of a tie and, looks really put together. And I had one suit that I'd bought at the Salvation Army. I got it for $7. It was kind of short on the cuffs, kind of like this shirt here. So it didn't fit properly, but I threw it on with some confidence and I managed to slip by security and I stopped at every floor to try to pitch my classes. And I remember I got to the 16th floor and I coincidentally ran into the head of human resources at a stock brokerage on that floor, and they were looking for an English teacher. And so I closed my first contract and I was able to extend my stay and kind of pay my way for the next kind of 6 to 9 months. So I'm in Colombia. I've been there for 5 or 6 months, and I realized that I've overstayed my visa in Colombia. So I find myself in the immigration office, and this is a very peculiar place to meet your co-founder of your business, but I saw this German guy he had a German passport, and I had an executive at the stockbrokers that wanted to learn German. So I struck up a conversation with him, and it turns out he was also backpacking and needed some additional money. And so he liked the idea of maybe teaching some German classes. And we would get together, and it turns out that he had a background in technology. I had interest in technology and entrepreneurship. And so we started our first business together, building websites for Spanish-speaking real estate agents in the US. So from Colombia, we would sell into the US market, and business was fairly good. We ended up, after a year and a half, 2 years, we ended up generating about $50,000 of recurring revenue every month. We were profitable. And then, we had this our little office here. It was hard, but we were able to make it work. And then, like a ton of bricks, the financial crisis happened in 2008. Our market essentially kind of evaporated overnight. $7 trillion of value just kind of disappeared in the real estate market, and many of our customers went out of business. So that was a time to go back to the drawing board, right? What are we going to do now? What's our next thing? How are we going to survive this? There's a lot of themes on survival I heard earlier too. So we ended up searching online. We saw that there was this high volume of people searching on Google. And going back to the original idea of this marketplace business, we thought, okay, let's try ourselves in Latin America, given that in the US there, clearly is some challenges in the real estate market. So I remember going to Google, sitting in my apartment, typing in apartamentos à venda in São Paulo, apartamentos à venda in Rio de Janeiro, Bogotá. And what struck me was that there was this massive volume of people searching for real estate, but the search results were these flash websites, and they weren't, really serving the consumer's need. And so I ended up, we had the idea of let's build this, this marketplace business. And now the challenge with that is you have a chicken and egg problem, right? Everyone knows about the chicken and egg with marketplaces businesses. What comes first? So the properties or the people searching? And we couldn't get anyone to list on our website. And at that point, we ended up getting a message. I got a message from a guy named Diego, who, serendipitously, he would send me this message on LinkedIn. We'd study together in Argentina, and, he was from Brazil. So I saw this opportunity in Brazil. All of a sudden, there's a Brazilian in my inbox that we studied together, and I told him instantly, I'm gonna go build a business in Brazil. Knew nothing about the place. So he was excited. We flew him to Colombia. He spent a month sleeping on our couch, and we ended up sending him back with $20,000 and a handshake. And it was really challenging to get these properties on our website. And so we hatched a plan. We struck out initially. We hatched a plan where I would call these brokers, and he would write a script for me in Portuguese, and I would basically, in my broken Portuguese, follow this script to get them, and they would instantly thought that I was some American buyer that was maybe buying a penthouse somewhere in São Paulo, and so they would connect immediately with the owner, and I would schedule a meeting for Diego, and we would get a free trial of these customers on our website to get the marketplace dynamics going. Now, we needed capital, right? Because there was incumbents, there was the largest media company we were going against. And so I ended up tracking down a guy by the name of Simon Baker. And Simon Baker was the CEO of what then was a multi-billion-dollar company. Today it's a $10 billion market cap company, prop tech business from Australia. And actually, he was attending an event, kind of like this one. It was an event of real estate folks, and I saw he was going to be there. And I sent him a message on Facebook and said, hey, I'm going to be there. Also similar to the CEO of Thistle, wasn't actually planning on going there. But when he responded, showed up, met him in a cafe, and pitched him the business. He took diligent notes the entire time, I remember. And at the end of the conversation, he looked at me and said, okay, so Brian, how much are you raising? And I kind of gulped pretty nervously, and I said, we're raising $1 million at a $5 million valuation. And he kind of looked at his notepad again, looked at me again, looked at his notepad, slammed the notepad shut. He's like, yeah, I think this meeting is over. We're in one of the worst financial crises in decades, and you're a bit delusional. And then he kind of stormed out. Now, I was pretty shocked and frankly pretty worried about it. I ended up calling him an hour later, and just to show you how big of a rookie I was about this fundraising game, I left him a message because he didn't answer, and I said, Simon, how about a $4 million valuation? Would you take that? On his voicemail. So clearly, that didn't go as the way I wanted it to go. But we needed money. So I did the only logical thing that an entrepreneur would do at this moment. And I sold my apartment, the only asset that I had, and put all of the money into the business. It was a tough conversation with Andrea, I remember. We worked through it. Now, so we sold this apartment, we put all the money in the business, and I remember about a year and a half later, I called Simon again, because I still needed some more money. And the conversation was different. Instead of him investing, I called him and I had to pay him to come visit into Brazil and hired him as a consultant. So he showed up, and right before he got there, I looked at my other co-founder and said, how are we gonna pay this guy? We're pretty short on funds. And we had the idea of hosting an event. And we hosted this event. We invited all the top real estate companies in the region, and we had him as a speaker. So we charged a little bit of money for the event. We created value for the attendees. And then we took the proceeds and we paid him the money. So this was something that he clearly saw the hustle, saw the hard work. And we ended up closing 50 new customers at that event. And he ended up basically saving the company shortly after that. We had $87 in the bank, 25 employees on payroll, and I remember the day that I got the wire for the $300,000 that he's ended up sending to save the company. After that, things really took off for the business. We bought companies, we expanded nationally. Things were really high flying. We raised $74 million of venture capital from top tier global and local funds. And everything on the outside looked amazing. Everything looked like, oh, this is the star of the market. I won Entrepreneur of the Year, but it couldn't be further from the truth. I remember feeling like everything could fall apart at any moment, and I remember just the struggle that I felt in that time. And something that really shaped me a lot and has really influenced how I've thought about my journey moving forward is I ended up connecting with a handful of other entrepreneurs who were also going through their own journey. And we formed the Breakfast Club. And the Breakfast Club would get together, regularly, and we would share our challenges, share, what things we were going through at that time. I'd had a panic attack at the time, and it was just a great opportunity to get support from other entrepreneurs. Now, as I think about my next journey here, wrapping up, I really wanted to go back and revisit this concept of Ikigai and thinking more about kind of what my purpose is. Now, Ikigai, to go in a little more detail, it's something I had the actual time to reflect and this luxury of time to think about. Ikigai is a combination of what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. So as I saw the impact that other people had on me in the journey, other founders, some investors, it really became clear that I wanted to elevate the next generation of entrepreneurs. So a couple years ago, I started Latitude. We have 1,600 founders that have gone through our equity-free fellowships, all in Latin America. They've collectively raised $800 million in venture capital from top global investors. And I want to leave you with just three reflections here that I think are useful as you kind of navigate this inevitable winter that is something you face as an entrepreneur. So the first one is, if you have passion and purpose, you can overcome any obstacle. I think that's a theme that we've heard today a little bit. The second one is, you've got to figure out how to manufacture your own serendipity. One thing my dad says is, there's no future in being a pessimist. So when something hits you, you got to figure out how to turn it into something positive. That's just the only way forward. And the last thing, which I think is relevant for everyone in this community here, is surround yourself by other entrepreneurs, other people that can, that maybe are one step ahead of you, or that, have been down the road before. And that will be critical to unlocking, the challenges. And I want to end with this quote here in the theme. And I put this quote on here. It's a really meaningful quote. I won't get into details why it's so meaningful, but I'll just mention. So my mom, she wrote a book of a topic way more important than any of this, a very difficult, hard topic. We don't have time, I ran out, and it's too deep to go into with this on stage here, but the start of her book has this quote. And she overcame a lot of things in her life, and I think that it's a good reminder for entrepreneurs that in the midst of winter, you can find that invincible summer inside you. So let's keep building, and let's overcome all the obstacles in our way. Thank you.